She joined a motorcycle club to feel free again. But by sunrise, every member had vanished without a trace. 10 riders roared into the Oregon forest under a full moon, and not a single one came back. What began as a ritual ride turned into one of the most chilling disappearances in small-town history. For over 2 decades, no bodies, no bikes, no answers. Until a drought drained the local reservoir and 8 rusted motorcycles surfaced, chained together beneath the mud, but one bike was still missing. And so was she. What did she see that night? And who made sure she never told? Through the smoky haze of the Rusted Horse Saloon, Eva Collier's laugh cuts bright and clear. She's perched on a worn leather bar stool, auburn hair catching amber in the dim light, her vest bearing the fresh-stitched raven's patch that still makes her heart swell with pride. Around her, 9 weather-beaten men in identical leather create a protective circle of fellowship and faded denim. You telling that brake failure story again, Mickey? She takes a pull from her beer bottle, pale blue eyes dancing. Because it gets more dramatic every time. Mickey, a barrel-chested mechanic with grease perpetually lodged under his fingernails, feigns offense. Shows what you know, rookie. That cliff got at least 50 feet higher since last time. The easy laughter that follows feels like home. More than the small apartment above Wilson's Hardware where Eva's been staying since leaving Portland 8 months ago. More than the suffocating suburbs where her ex-husband still lives. Here, among the ravens, she's found something raw and real. Jace Marin watches from his corner seat, green eyes reflecting nothing. His iron-gray hair catches the neon beer sign's glow like a steel halo. Unlike the others, he nurses water instead of whiskey. The night ahead demands clarity. 10 minutes, he announces, voice carrying without effort. The casual atmosphere shifts, something electric replacing the easy camaraderie. Eva feels it in her spine. The way the air changes before a storm. Outside, a full August moon hangs low and swollen over the Cascade foothills. Through the saloon's grimy windows, Eva can see their bikes lined up like sleeping predators. 9 gleaming Harleys and her smaller Triumph, looking almost dainty in comparison. But it doesn't matter tonight. She'll be riding double with Jace, an honor that sent whispers through town when announced. Tommy Cray Dawson, the youngest Raven at 34, keeps checking his watch. His fingers drum an uneven rhythm on the bar's scarred wood. Should we go through the... No need, Jace cuts him off. Everyone knows their place in the circle. Eva catches Sarah, the bartender, watching them with poorly concealed curiosity. In 8 months of serving the Ravens, she's never seen them like this. Tense, focused, almost reverent. The Midnight Circle is spoken of in whispers around Marrow Creek. Some say it's just a ride. Others claim it's something darker. Eva herself doesn't know what to expect, but the mystery pulls at her like an undertow. Time to mount up, Jace says, standing with fluid grace that belies his 49 years. The others follow suit, a choreographed movement born of long practice. Eva slides off her stool last, adjusting her vest with steady hands that betray none of her inner excitement. Sarah moves to clear their bottles, her face carefully neutral. Ride safe, she offers, the standard farewell in biker country. But something in her tone suggests she knows it's anything but standard. Tonight, outside, the air holds the lingering warmth of an Oregon summer evening, crickets chorus from the tree line where pavement gives way to forest. The moon casts everything in silver, sharp enough to cut. Eva walks to her Triumph, running a hand along its familiar curves before Jace approaches. Ready? He asks, though it's not really a question. His own bike, a massive black Road King, gleams like oil in moonlight. Born ready, she replies with more confidence than she feels. Around them, the others are performing their pre-ride rituals, checking gauges, adjusting mirrors, murmuring what might be prayers. Mickey kicks his starter, the roar shattering the night's quiet. One by one, the others follow suit until 9 engines harmonize in a thunderous chorus. Eva swings up behind Jace, wrapping her arms around his solid frame. The leather of their vests creaks together. Through the rusted horse's window, Sarah glances at the ancient clock above the bar. 10:07 p.m. The ravens of Marrow Creek move as one, rolling out of the gravel lot onto the empty street. Eva feels Jace's body tense slightly as they take point, leading the formation toward the mountain roads. The town falls away quickly. Streetlights give way to darkness, broken only by headlamps and moonlight. The pack moves with practiced precision, each rider knowing their exact position in the formation. They pass the now leaving Marrow Creek sign. Population 2,847 rendered ghostly in their passing lights. The road begins to climb, threading through stands of Douglas fir that crowd close to the asphalt. Eva breathes in the sharp scent of pine and exhaust, feeling more alive than she has in years. The wind whips at her jacket, but she's warm where she's pressed against Jace's back. Their headlights catch glimpses of wildlife, a startled deer, the gleam of watching eyes from the underbrush. The moon seems to follow them, appearing and disappearing between the trees as they climb higher into the Cascades foothills. After 20 minutes, they turn onto a fire road Eva's never noticed before. The pavement ends, replaced by packed gravel that crunches under their tires. The formation tightens, more careful now on the treacherous surface. Eva glances back, seeing the string of headlights behind them like a chain of stars. In the moonlight, the ravens look otherworldly. Chrome flashing, leather shadows moving in formation. She catches a glimpse of Cray's face as they round a bend, his expression unreadable behind his windscreen. The fire road narrows, forcing them into single file. The forest presses closer, branches reaching over them like grasping fingers. Eva feels the temperature drop as they climb higher, the summer warmth bleeding away into mountain chill. Jace hasn't spoken since they left town, but his body remains steady and sure as he guides the Road King through the darkness. Eva wants to ask where they're going, what happens next, but the engine noise swallows all possibility of conversation. Besides, she knows better. The Midnight Circle has rules, even if no one's written them down. They pass a weathered sign marking the boundary of National Forest land, its warning about permits barely legible in the sweep of their lights. The moon has risen higher now, casting sharp shadows across the rutted road. Eva's watch reads 10:43 p.m. when they make another turn, this one onto a trail that barely qualifies as a path. The Ravens formation holds steady despite the challenging terrain. These men have ridden together for years, trust built through countless miles. Eva feels both honored and slightly anxious to be part of this clearly sacred ritual. Whatever happens tonight will change things. She can feel it in the electric tension running through Jace's frame, in the focused silence of the riders behind them. Through gaps in the canopy, Eva catches glimpses of the valley below. Marrow Creek is just a scatter of lights now, distant as stars. They've climbed higher than she realized, the air noticeably thinner in her lungs. The forest has changed too. Older trees, deeper shadows, an ancient feeling that makes her skin prickle. A clearing appears ahead, perfectly circular, as if carved from the forest by giant hands. Jace slows the bike, and the others follow suit. The rumble of engines echoes off the surrounding trees, creating a canyon of sound before he cuts the ignition. One by one, the other bikes fall silent. In the sudden quiet, Eva can hear the wind in the treetops, the creak of leather, the soft ping of cooling engines. The moon bathes everything in silvery light, making the clearing look like a stage set for some primeval drama. No one moves at first. Eva remains pressed against Jace's back, feeling his measured breathing. Around them, the ravens sit astride their bikes like statues, waiting. The air feels charged, as if lightning is about to strike. Finally, Jace speaks, his voice carrying easily in the stillness. The circle is drawn. The night is ours. The words have the weight of ritual, and Eva feels a shiver that has nothing to do with the mountain air. As one, the ravens begin to dismount. Their boots crunch on gravel and pine needles as they take positions around the clearing's edge. Eva slides off the Road King, legs slightly shaky from the long ride. She starts to step away, but Jace's hand catches her wrist. His grip is gentle but immovable. "Stay close," he murmurs, and something in his tone makes her pulse quicken. His eyes reflect moonlight like a predator's. The ravens begin moving with purpose now, retrieving items from saddlebags. Bundles wrapped in dark cloth, metal things that gleam dully. Eva watches, fascination warring with a growing sense of unease. This is more than a midnight ride. This is something older, something that tastes of smoke and secrets. The moon hangs directly overhead now, turning the clearing into a silver bowl cupped in the dark palms of the forest. Eva stands beside Jace's bike, watching the ravens prepare for whatever comes next, feeling like she's balanced on the edge of a revelation or a precipice. Sarah's "ride safe" echoes in her memory as Mickey begins arranging objects in a pattern on the ground. The night holds its breath, waiting. The morning sun filters through Eva's kitchen curtains, casting warm rectangles on the empty countertop. Laurel Collier sits at the small table, fingers wrapped around a cooling mug of coffee, watching the clock tick past 7 a.m. Her sister's bed hasn't been slept in. She reaches for her cell phone again, hits redial. The familiar voicemail greeting plays. "Hey, this is Eva. Leave a message if you want, but texting works better." Laurel hangs up without speaking. She's already left 3 messages. The house feels wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Eva's cat, Maurice, sits in the windowsill watching birds, unconcerned by his owner's absence. Laurel envies his calm. "She's a grown woman," Laurel mutters to herself, trying to squash the worry gnawing at her stomach. This is what motorcycle people do, right? Stay out all night, but Eva always calls. That's their rule, established after the divorce when Eva first moved to this tiny timber town. No matter what, they check in. By 8, Laurel can't sit still any longer. She grabs her keys and jacket, heading for the Rusted Horse Saloon. The morning air holds a hint of autumn despite the August heat to come. Dew sparkles on parked cars and storefronts as she walks the 3 blocks to Main Street. The saloon's windows are dark, but she spots movement inside. Knocking firmly on the glass door, she waits until Sarah, the bartender from last night, peers out. Recognition flickers across the woman's tired face as she unlocks the door. "We're not open yet," Sarah says, but steps back to let Laurel in. The bar smells of stale beer and pine-scented cleaner. "You're Eva's sister, right?" "Yes. Have you heard from any of them? The ravens?" Laurel asks, following Sarah to the bar where she's counting register cash. "Eva never came home last night." Sarah's hands pause briefly over the money. "That's normal for midnight circle nights. They usually ride late, camp somewhere." She resumes counting, not meeting Laurel's eyes. "They'll turn up when they turn up. But where do they go?" "Which direction?" Laurel presses. Something in Sarah's carefully casual tone sets off warning bells. "Up into the national forest, usually." "Look," Sarah sighs, finally looking directly at Laurel. "The ravens have their traditions. Eva knew what she was getting into when she joined. They don't like people asking questions about their rides." Laurel's jaw tightens. "She's my sister. She always lets me know she's safe. She's with Jace and the others. She's fine." Sarah's tone carries a hint of dismissal as she turns away to stock glasses. Give it time. Outside again, Laurel stands on the sidewalk, frustration building. The town is waking up around Enid. Her. Pickup trucks rumbling past. Early shoppers heading to the grocery store. The smell of bacon from the diner across the street. Everything normal, except her sister is missing. The sheriff's office occupies an old brick building next to the town hall. Inside, the air conditioning hums aggressively, and a desk sergeant looks up from his computer as Laurel approaches. "Can I help you?" "I need to report a missing person. Well, persons," Laurel says, pulling out her reporter's notebook. "Old habits die hard. The Ravens Motorcycle Club went on a ride last night and haven't returned. My sister Eva was with them." "The Midnight Circle?" The sergeant, his nameplate reads Thompson, leans back in his chair. "Ma'am, we go through this every year. They're not missing. Every year? Laurel's pen pauses on the page. The Ravens do their thing. Sometimes they're gone a day or two. Sheriff Harlan knows about it. Thompson shrugs. Unless you have reason to believe there's been an accident or foul play. My sister always calls, Laurel insists. She wouldn't just disappear without contact. Tell you what, I'll note your concern. If we don't hear from them by tomorrow morning, we can start looking into it. His tone makes it clear he's humoring her. Meanwhile, try not to worry. The Ravens know these mountains better than anyone. Laurel recognizes the brush-off for what it is. She's used similar techniques herself as a reporter, steering anxious sources toward calmer waters. But this is different. This is Eva. The day crawls by. Laurel drives Eva's usual routes. The vet clinic where she works, closed Sundays. The coffee shop she frequents, no one's seen her. The outlook point where she sometimes parks to watch sunsets. No sign of motorcycles, no tire tracks, no evidence of the Ravens' passage. She tries calling other members' known numbers, but they all go straight to voicemail. The club's unofficial headquarters, a converted gas station on the edge of town, is locked up tight, the windows dark. By late afternoon, the August heat has become oppressive. Laurel sits in her car outside Eva's house, watching shadows lengthen across the yard. Her phone shows no new messages. She's called every hospital in a 100-mile radius. Nothing. The sun is setting when she finally remembers something Eva once mentioned. A logging road where the Ravens sometimes gathered. Up past Miller's Creek, she'd said. Beautiful view of the valley. It takes 3 wrong turns before Laurel finds it. The road is barely more than a track now, threading up into the deeper forest. She parks at the entrance, where a rusty gate hangs open. The evening light filters through towering pines, creating shifting patterns on the dusty ground. And there, clear in the dirt, are motorcycle tracks. Multiple sets, heading up into the gathering darkness. Laurel counts them by flashlight. 10 distinct patterns of tire treads, still visible despite the day's wind. She stands there as dusk settles around her, staring up the road where the tracks disappear into shadow. Crickets begin their evening chorus. A cool breeze carries the scent of pine and something else. Motorcycle exhaust, hours old. Behind her, Marrow Creek's lights are beginning to twinkle on, one by one. But up ahead, where her sister vanished with 9 leather-clad men, there is only darkness and silence. The tracks tell a simple story. They rode this way. But something in Laurel's gut, the same instinct that served her through years of investigative reporting, whispers that their return journey won't be so straightforward. She shivers despite the lingering warmth of the day, watching the last sunlight fade from the highest treetops. The logging road continues upward, lost in the deepening gloom, offering no answers about where her sister has gone. The morning after her discovery of the motorcycle tracks, Laurel stands in Eva's kitchen making calls. Her reporter's notebook lies open beside a map of the Cascade foothills, its pages filled with names and numbers. Outside, fog clings to the pines, turning Marrow Creek into a town of shadows. Yes, that's right. 10 motorcyclists missing since Saturday night, she explains to the 4th local news desk she's contacted. Like the others, they seem uninterested. Just another group of bikers who'll probably turn up hungover in some roadside motel. But by mid-morning, something shifts. Word spreads through town about Eva's absence. She's not some anonymous biker. She's the gentle vet tech who bottle-fed orphaned kittens, who volunteered at the elementary school's career day. People begin to worry. Carol from the diner organizes the first search party. By noon, 24 volunteers gather in the grocery store parking lot, thermoses of coffee and hiking boots ready. Laurel watches them arrive. Loggers who know the back roads, retired park rangers, members of the local church. They study her hastily printed maps, marking zones to cover. We'll start at Miller's Creek Road and work our way up, Carol announces, taking charge with the efficiency of someone used to managing breakfast rushes. Teams of 3 stay in radio contact. Look for any signs of bikes, camping,
Or, she doesn't finish the sentence. But the forest holds its secrets. By sunset, they've found nothing. No tire marks beyond the initial logging road. No broken branches suggesting vehicles leaving the trail. No sign of recent campfires. The hills above Marrow Creek remain silent. Sheriff Harlan finally agrees to send deputies, but their sweep feels perfunctory. No signs of collision or foul play. The official report notes, all subjects are consenting adults who left voluntarily. Laurel knows they need professional help. Through contacts in Portland, she finds Dean Mercer, a freelance tracker who used to work with wildfire crews in the Cascades. He arrives on Tuesday morning in a weathered Jeep. His movements, deliberate as he studies the tire tracks she found. 10 bikes, heading up, he confirms, kneeling to examine the dirt. No return tracks overlaying these. He stands, squinting up the shadowed road. They went in, but they didn't come out this way. Dean works methodically, moving up the logging road while Laurel follows. He stops often, noting broken twigs, displaced stones, subtle signs she would have missed. The morning fog burns away as they climb, revealing steep drops and dense forest on either side. 3 miles up, Dean freezes. There, he points to a faint track branching off the main road. Bikes turned here, single file. Recent. The side trail is barely visible, threading between ancient pines. They follow it on foot, climbing steadily until the trees thin into a natural clearing. Dean stops at the edge, his expression changing. What is it? Laurel asks. He moves forward slowly, studying the ground. The clearing's center is different, darker, with a strange pattern in the dirt and grass. Dean kneels, rubbing ash between his fingers. Something burned here, he says quietly, hot enough to scorch the ground. But it was contained, deliberate. He traces the circular pattern. Someone cleaned up afterward, tried to hide it. But the ash pattern remains. Laurel photographs everything while Dean searches the perimeter. He finds one item, a single motorcycle glove, badly charred, half buried under leaves as if thrown aside. Nothing else remains. Back in town, the atmosphere has changed. People who were helpful days ago now look away when Laurel approaches. The bartender at the Rusted Horse claims she lost the sign-in log from Saturday night. Even Carol seems reluctant to organize more searches. At the diner that evening, Laurel sits alone with cooling coffee, transcribing her notes. A young waitress, Jenny, according to her name tag, hovers nearby, glancing over repeatedly. Finally, she approaches, speaking low. My grandmother used to tell stories, Jenny says, pretending to wipe the counter. About the ravens, the midnight circle. She said it wasn't just a ride. She looks around nervously. They say the circle chooses who comes back. What does that mean? Laurel asks, but Jenny is already hurrying away as other customers enter. Dean's official report goes to the sheriff's office, detailing the burned clearing and suggesting further investigation. Sheriff Harlan dismisses it, citing lack of evidence. When Laurel protests, he simply says, no crime scene, no bodies, no case. The sun is setting when Laurel returns to Eva's house, exhausted and frustrated. Maurice the cat greets her with his usual indifference. The house feels emptier each day, as if Eva's absence is slowly erasing her presence. Laurel moves through the quiet rooms, touching familiar objects. Eva's coffee mug in the dish rack, her half-read novel on the bedside table, her favorite plants still green and reaching for light. Everything waits for a return. That feels increasingly uncertain. Near the front door, Eva's denim jacket still hangs on its hook, the one she wore almost daily to the vet clinic. Laurel reaches out, fingers brushing the worn fabric. The jacket holds traces of her sister, a forgotten tissue in one pocket, a receipt from the grocery store, the faint scent of Eva's shampoo still lingering in the collar. It's such a normal thing, this jacket waiting for its owner. So ordinary, it makes Laurel's chest ache. Eva should be here, coming home from work, shrugging off this jacket while telling Laurel about her day.
Instead, there's only silence and questions without answers. The jacket hangs there, a simple testament to interrupted life, while outside, the evening shadows gather, and somewhere in the hills above Marrow Creek, 10 motorcycles and their riders remain lost to the dark. September brought early rains to Marrow Creek. Water drummed against Eva's kitchen windows as Laurel made another call to the Oregon State Police. "Ma'am, as we've explained before, without evidence of foul play." The dispatcher's voice carried the weary tone of someone repeating a practiced response. 10 people disappeared in one night, Laurel cut in, pacing the linoleum floor. Their vehicles are missing, their bank accounts untouched. How is that not suspicious? The sheriff's department has jurisdiction. If they haven't requested our assistance, the sheriff isn't doing anything. Laurel's voice echoed off empty walls. Maurice the cat startled from his perch, slinking away. She forced herself to breathe, to steady her voice. "Please, my sister is missing. I understand your concern, but—" A pause, paper shuffling. "According to the report, these individuals were members of a known motorcycle club with questionable associations. Group disappearances in such organizations aren't uncommon." The line clicked dead. Laurel stared at her phone, throat tight with frustration. She'd spent 3 weeks making calls like this, to state agencies, newspapers, missing persons organizations. The responses ranged from polite dismissal to outright suspicion. Who were these people really? Maybe they just rode off somewhere. Maybe they didn't want to be found. But Laurel knew her sister. Eva wouldn't vanish without a word, wouldn't abandon her job, her home, her cat. Not by choice. Rain pelted the windows as Laurel grabbed her keys. Time to try a different approach. The Rusted Horse Saloon sat dark and silent at 10 in the morning, but Laurel could see movement inside. She rapped on the glass door until Sarah, the owner, appeared with an irritated expression. "We're closed. I need to see the sign-in book from August 14th. Laurel kept her foot in the doorframe. "The night log, showing who was here." Sarah's weathered face hardened. "Told you last week. Lost it. A legal document required by the liquor board? Just happened to lose it the morning after 10 people vanished?" Accidents happen. Sarah moved to close the door, but Laurel pressed forward. "The police might be interested in—" "It burned." Sarah's voice dropped, eyes darting to the empty street. "Had a small fire that morning. Cleaning up, you know. Old papers caught spark from the ashtray." Laurel stared at her. "You burned evidence in an active missing persons case? Wasn't evidence of nothing." Sarah finally met her gaze. "Just names on paper. Wouldn't have helped find them anyway." "That's not your call to make." "Listen," Sarah glanced around again, leaning closer. "Some things in this town, better left alone. Your sister knew that, before the end." "What's that supposed to mean?" But Sarah was already retreating, the door closing firmly. The lock clicked with decisive finality. Laurel stood in the drizzle, Sarah's words echoing. Before the end. What had Eva known? At the local newspaper office, the reception desk sat empty. Laurel walked straight back to the editor's office, where Ted Morrison hunched over his ancient desktop computer. "Need a quote about the Ravens case," she said, dropping into the chair across from him. Ted didn't look up. "No case to quote on. Sheriff closed it yesterday." "What?" Laurel's hands gripped the armrests. "They can't just—" "No evidence of crime. No bodies. No wreckage." Ted finally met her eyes, looking tired. "Story's dead, Laurel. Like all the others." "Others?" Ted sighed, glancing at his door before opening a drawer. He pulled out a thick manila folder, worn at the edges. "Town's got history. Things that don't make the papers." He pushed the folder across his desk. "Take it. Maybe you'll see something I missed." Inside, Laurel found yellowed clippings dating back to the 1970s. Small items, buried in back pages. Hunters missing in the hills. Hikers who never returned. A family's car found abandoned on a logging road. No signs of struggle. "Some got solved," Ted said quietly. "Most didn't. Notice anything about the dates?" Laurel scanned the clippings, all between August and September, all during full moons. The ravens started as something else, Ted continued. Some kind of spiritual movement in the 70s. Beliefs about the roads, the forest, rituals. He shrugged. Changed over time, got more secretive. Jace took over in '85, kept the old ways, but added new ones. Eva never mentioned. Course not. Club had rules. Ted leaned back. Question is, which rule did she break? Laurel left the newspaper office with the folder tucked under her jacket, mind churning. At the diner, she claimed her usual booth, spreading the clippings across the Formica table. Jenny appeared with coffee, eyes widening at the newspaper stories. You're still looking? Someone has to. Laurel studied the young waitress. You mentioned your grandmother's stories. About the circle? Jenny glanced around nervously. She's dead now. Cancer, 3 years back. She twisted her apron. But she used to say, there were places in the hills. Sacred places. The ravens would ride there on full moons, looking for something. She shook her head. Never said what, just that sometimes people didn't come back. Did she know why? She said. Jenny stopped as other customers entered. I can't. They'll fire me. She hurried away, leaving Laurel with cooling coffee and more questions. The rain continued for days. Laurel drove the logging roads until her gas tank neared empty, hiked muddy trails until her boots wore through. She knocked on doors, asked questions, showed Eva's photo to anyone who would look. Some locals crossed the street when they saw her coming. Others offered vague condolences before quickly excusing themselves. A few seemed genuinely sorry, but insisted they knew nothing. The burned clearing Dean found was now underwater, the autumn rains having turned it into a muddy pool. Any evidence that might have remained was lost. At the sheriff's office, Deputy Martinez handed her the official closure notice. Case is inactive, he said, not meeting her eyes. Insufficient evidence to pursue investigation. There are witness statements, Laurel protested. The burned clearing, the missing ledger, hearsay, and circumstantial details. Martinez shuffled papers on his desk. Look, Ms. Collier, I'm sorry about your sister, but without concrete evidence of foul play, we can't justify resources for a cold case. Cold case? Laurel's voice cracked. It's been 3 weeks, and we have nothing actionable. He finally looked at her, expression carefully neutral. Sometimes people just leave. 10 people don't just leave, Deputy. Not without a trace. You'd be surprised. He stood, signaling the conversation's end. File stays open technically. You find any real evidence? Bring it in. That evening, Laurel sat in Eva's bathroom, staring at her sister's toothbrush still sitting in its holder. The bristles were splayed from use, a smudge of dried toothpaste on the handle. Such a simple thing, this daily tool waiting for its owner's return. 3 weeks. No leads, no help, no answers. Just a town full of people looking away, keeping secrets behind closed doors and careful silences. Laurel picked up the toothbrush, its plastic worn smooth from Eva's grip. Her sister had stood here that last morning, rushing through her routine, unaware it would be the final time. What had she known? What had she seen that made her ride into the darkness with 9 men who never came back? The bathroom mirror reflected Laurel's tired face, the dark circles under her eyes, the new lines worry had carved around her mouth. She was alone in this now. No police, no press, no allies in this town of shadows and whispered stories. But she had Eva's toothbrush, her jacket, her home full of interrupted life. She had questions that demanded answers, and a sister somewhere in the dark. She would not look away. She would not forget. The rain drummed against the roof, washing away traces of those who vanished into the August night. But Laurel remained, holding a worn toothbrush like a promise, while somewhere in Marrow Creek, someone held the truth behind closed doors. The Portland rain felt different from Marrow Creek's, sharper, more insistent. Laurel stood at her apartment window, watching droplets trace paths down the glass while her coffee grew cold. 6 months had passed since she'd left Eva's house, locked the door, and driven away. The key still weighed heavy in her desk drawer. Her editor had been understanding, up to a point. "Take the time you need," he'd said. But after 3 months of minimal freelance work and scattered attention, the assignments stopped coming. Now she edited technical manuals from home, the monotonous work leaving her mind free to circle endlessly around the same questions. The binder sat on her desk, thick with photocopied articles, interview notes, and photographs. She'd labeled it simply, "The Ride." Inside, everything was organized chronologically, cross-referenced, annotated with colored tabs. Red for suspicious details, yellow for potential leads, green for dead ends. There were far too many green tabs. She pulled out her latest letter to Unsolved Northwest, a regional true crime program. "Dear Producer Hamilton, I'm writing regarding the disappearance of 10 individuals from Merrow Creek, Oregon on August 14, 1999. Among them was my sister, Eva Collier." The words blurred together. She'd written dozens of these letters now, each one carefully crafted to highlight the most compelling aspects of the case. The mysterious motorcycle club, the burnt clearing, the missing logbook, the pattern of full moon disappearances stretching back decades. Most never replied. Those that did sent polite form letters. "While your story is compelling, we receive many submissions." She'd pinned these rejections to her wall, a growing collection of diplomatic dismissals. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Saw therapist again. Says I need to accept and move forward. Maybe you should too." Laurel didn't respond. Her mother had chosen closure over truth, preferring comfortable uncertainty to endless questions. They barely spoke anymore. Instead, she opened her laptop and checked the cold case forums where she'd posted Eva's story. A few comments had trickled in overnight. "Sounds like voluntary disappearance. Biker clubs do this sometimes." "Check Mexico? Probably witness protection. Government operation gone wrong." "Classic cult behavior. They're all dead in some compound." She closed the browser. These amateur sleuths meant well, but their theories felt hollow against the weight of what she knew, what she felt in her bones. Something had happened on that mountain, something the town was still hiding. Her landline rang, startling her. Few people had this number. "Ms. Collier?" A familiar voice. "It's Sarah, from the Horse." Laurel's hand tightened on the receiver. Sarah had never called before. "Place is being sold," Sarah continued, voice tight. "New owners take over next month. Thought you should know." "Why tell me?" A pause. "They're changing everything. Renovating. Towns moving on, like nothing happened." Another pause. "Like they never existed." "The Ravens?" "All of it." Sarah's voice dropped. "Listen, I'm not saying I know anything, but if you want, there's some old photos, club stuff from the walls. Was gonna trash them, but I'll come get them." "No." Sarah's response was sharp. "Can't have you here. I'll mail them. Just, some things shouldn't be forgotten, even if we can't understand them." The line went dead before Laurel could reply. 2 weeks later, a manila envelope arrived with no return address. Inside, she found faded photographs spanning decades. The Ravens at various gatherings, their faces changing over the years as members came and went. Jace appeared in many, his presence commanding even in still images. And there, in the most recent ones, Eva, her smile bright against the leather of her vest, standing among the men who would vanish with her. Laurel added the photos to the binder, creating a new section. As she worked, a small newspaper clipping fell from the envelope, recent from the Merrow Creek Gazette. "Historic rusted horse saloon, under new management. Local landmark to undergo renovation, rebranding." She read between the lines. "Erasing history. wiping away uncomfortable memories. The town's specialty. That evening, she called Dean, the tracker who'd helped search the mountains. "Still nothing," he said before she could ask. "Check the area whenever I'm up that way. No signs, no changes." He hesitated. "Town's different now. Quieter. People don't talk about it anymore." "The saloon's being sold." "Heard that. Changing the name, too. The Pioneer Tap, or something generic." He sighed. "Look, Laurel, might be time to, don't say, let it go. Was gonna say, take a break. You're burning yourself out. Truth isn't going anywhere." But it was, she thought after hanging up. Every day, memories faded. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses moved away or chose silence. Time itself was conspiring to bury the mystery. She took the binder to a copy shop, had everything scanned and backed up to multiple drives. Then she started sending copies to journalists, investigators, anyone who might listen. Most went straight to recycling bins or delete folders, she knew. But maybe one would land in the right hands. Spring came to Portland, then summer. Laurel worked, researched, wrote letters. She created a detailed timeline of the Ravens' history, cross-referenced with local events and similar cases across the Pacific Northwest. The binder grew thicker. In July, she drove to Marrow Creek for the first time since leaving. The town felt smaller somehow. Newer signs hung on familiar buildings. Fresh paint covered old walls. The rusted horse was surrounded by construction equipment. Through gaps in the paper-covered windows, she glimpsed gutted interiors. A dumpster in the back lot overflowed with debris. Old boards, broken furniture, pieces of the past deemed worthless. She parked across the street, watching workers come and go. None looked up. None would remember the night 10 people rode away under a full moon. A teenager approached the building's back wall, glancing around before pulling out a spray can. Laurel tensed, ready to call out, but stayed silent as the boy began painting over the faded Ravens emblem. The weathered bird that had watched over the alley for decades. The black paint dripped like tears, obscuring wings and beak until only a dark rectangle remained. The boy added a crude tag, his own mark replacing history. Then he was gone, leaving only the wet paint and the dying sunlight. Laurel sat in her car until darkness fell, watching the last visible trace of the Ravens disappear beneath layers of someone else's story. She drove back to Portland that night, the binder riding shotgun like a silent passenger. In her rearview mirror, Marrow Creek receded into the gathering dark. Its secrets held close, its silence deeper than ever. But the binder remained. And as long as it existed, as long as someone remembered, the truth couldn't completely fade away. The rain started as she crossed the county line. She turned on her wipers, cleared her windshield, and kept driving. There was work still to do. July 15th, 2022. Marrow Creek, Oregon. The sun beat down on Danner Reservoir, turning what should have been a mirror-like surface into a vast expanse of cracked mud and withered vegetation. Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his forehead as he picked his way across the exposed lake bed, his sneakers leaving deep prints in the still damp soil. Behind him, Kayla Rodriguez and Josh Turner followed, their phones recording the devastation for their TikTok accounts. "This is insane," Kayla said, panning her camera across the landscape. "My dad used to fish here every weekend. Now look at it." The reservoir had transformed into an alien terrain. Dead trees that had been submerged for decades now reached toward the sky like skeletal fingers. The waterline had receded nearly 40 feet, leaving fishing docks stranded high and dry, their support posts exposed and weathered. "Check out all this stuff people dropped," Josh called out, stooping to examine a collection of old fishing lures caught in the mud. "We could probably make bank selling this vintage crap online." Marcus wasn't listening. Something had caught his eye near a collapsed dock about 50 yards ahead, a glint of metal where there shouldn't be any. "Hey guys, come look at this." The 3 teenagers picked their way carefully across the treacherous surface. The mud got deeper as they approached what remained of the old dock, its wooden planks rotted and broken from years underwater. "Watch your step," Marcus warned as Kayla's foot sank ankle-deep into the muck. "This stuff's like quicksand." They were about 10 feet from the collapsed structure when Marcus stopped abruptly. There, emerging from the mud like the fossil of some ancient creature, was a curved piece of metal. Unmistakably a motorcycle handlebar. "No way," Josh breathed, already recording. "Is that what I think it is?" Kayla crouched down, careful to keep her balance. "There's more. Look." She pointed to other shapes barely visible beneath the surface. The suggestion of chrome. The curve of what might be a wheel. "We should call someone," Marcus said, pulling out his phone. Despite the heat, he felt a chill run down his spine. This isn't right. The local police arrived within 30 minutes, followed quickly by state authorities. The teenagers were escorted back to solid ground, while officers secured the area with yellow tape. By sunset, the site was illuminated by portable floodlights, and a team of state police divers was suiting up at the water's edge. Detective Sarah Reeves stood at the command post, watching the divers prepare through binoculars. 23 years on the force, and she'd never seen anything quite like this. The initial sonar sweep had revealed multiple large objects beneath the mud, all clustered together. "Water's still about 12 feet deep at the center," the dive team leader reported, adjusting his equipment. "Visibility's poor, maybe 2 feet at best. We'll need to work by touch mostly." Reeves nodded. "Take it slow. Document everything exactly as you find it." The first diver disappeared beneath the murky surface at 8:47 p.m. His voice crackled over the radio 9 minutes later. "I've got something. Multiple vehicles. They're chained together. Going to need more light down here." Over the next 3 hours, the team worked methodically in the fading light. One by one, they located and mapped 8 motorcycles, their chrome dulled by years underwater, their seats long since rotted away. Each bike was connected to the others by heavy chains, wrapped around their frames and secured with padlocks that had fused shut from corrosion. "There's concrete blocks too," a diver reported, attached to the chains. "Someone wanted these to stay down." Reeves felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate concealment. By midnight, portable generators hummed as crime scene technicians photographed and cataloged each piece of evidence as it was carefully winched from the water. The bikes were laid out in a row on plastic tarps. 8 mud-covered machines, their metal corroded but still recognizable as Harley-Davidsons from the late 1919s. "Check the VIN numbers," Reeves ordered, though she already suspected what they'd find. She'd been a rookie when the Ravens disappeared, too junior to work the case, but old enough to remember the whispers, the theories, the way the town had slowly closed ranks around its secrets. A young officer approached, holding up an evidence bag containing something dark and heavy with lake water. "Detective, you need to see this." Under the harsh portable lights, Reeves examined the item through the clear plastic. A leather motorcycle vest, the material waterlogged and deteriorating. Despite decades underwater, some details were still visible. A faded patch on the front showed what might have been a bird in flight. But it was the back that made her breath catch. There, in partially preserved white stitching across the shoulders, was a single word: Eva. The rest of the vest was revealing itself as the water drained away, the leather scarred by what looked like a deliberate knife slash near the armpit. Reeves stared at it, remembering the missing persons reports, the faces on the posters that had yellowed and curled in post office windows before finally being taken down. "Get me everything you can find on the Ravens case," she told her assistant, "and contact Laurel Collier in Portland. Tell her we found her sister's motorcycle club." Around her, the recovery operation continued under the glare of floodlights. 8 motorcycles. 8 machines that had carried their riders into mystery on a summer night 23 years ago. But it was the vest that held her attention. This tangible piece of Eva Collier, preserved in the dark waters of Danner Reservoir like a message in a bottle. Finally delivered after all these years. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while Laurel was editing a manuscript about deep-sea exploration. Her phone buzzed against a stack of sticky notes, the Oregon area code making her heart skip. 23 years of false hopes had taught her to expect disappointment, but something felt different this time. "Ms. Collier?" The voice was professional, measured. "This is Detective Sarah Reeves with the Oregon State Police. We need to discuss the Danner Reservoir discovery." Laurel's red pen slipped from her fingers. She'd been following the drought news, seeing photos of the receding waterline, but hadn't connected it to Eva. Not yet. "Go ahead." "We've recovered several motorcycles from the lake bed, and a leather vest with your sister's name." Detective Reeves paused. "The forensics team has confirmed it belonged to Eva Collier." The world tilted sideways. Laurel gripped her desk, knuckles white against the wood. Through her apartment window, Portland's afternoon traffic continued its steady hum, oblivious to how everything had just changed. "How?" Laurel cleared her throat. "How can you be sure?" "The stitching matches photos from your sister's missing persons file. There's also a repair receipt in one of the inside pockets. It's partially degraded, but Eva's signature is still visible." Laurel closed her eyes. She remembered that repair. Eva had torn the vest climbing over a fence to help a trapped cat. She'd joked about being a terrible biker, but a good Samaritan. "I'm driving down," Laurel said. "Today. We'll be working the scene through the week. Call when you're close." Laurel was already moving, muscle memory from countless trips, over 2 decades. The emergency bag in her closet. The binder labeled "The Ride" that never gathered dust. Her laptop with every digital scrap of information about the Ravens case. She called her clients, rescheduling deadlines, packed enough clothes for a week. Her hands moved mechanically while her mind raced through old questions. Why the reservoir? Who chained the bikes together? Was Eva trying to tell her something? The 3-hour drive to Marrow Creek felt both eternal and instantaneous. Oregon's late summer landscape blurred past her window. Evergreen forests giving way to logging clear-cuts. Small towns that seemed frozen in time. The same route she'd driven monthly in those first desperate years. Weekly in the beginning. Marrow Creek appeared suddenly around a bend, nestled in its valley like a secret kept too long. The population sign still read 2,187, though Laurel knew that number had dropped. The main street looked eerily unchanged. Miller's Hardware, the post office with its faded brick, Crown Diner where Eva used to get chocolate milkshakes. She pulled into the Evergreen Motel. Same peeling green paint, same neon vacancy sign missing the N. The elderly clerk looked up from his crossword puzzle, recognition flooding his face. "Room 12, he said quietly, sliding a key across the counter. Her old room, the one she'd lived in during those first months of searching. "Thanks, Mr. Peterson. Town's been talking," he offered carefully. "About what they found." "Let them talk," Laurel said. "Maybe this time someone will say something true." She carried her bags to the room, muscle memory again guiding her steps. Inside, the decor hadn't changed. Same forest-themed wallpaper, same lumpy armchair by the window. She set her suitcase down and pulled out the binder. The familiar weight of the ride in her hands brought back everything. The endless interviews, the late-night research, the walls of silence she'd hit again and again. She'd added to it over the years. Newspaper clippings, forum discussions, theories that led nowhere. But the first page remained the same. A photo of Eva sitting on her front porch, auburn hair catching the sunset, smile hiding whatever shadows she'd seen. Laurel's phone buzzed. Detective Reeves updating her on the recovery operation. 8 motorcycles so far. Forensics teams working around the clock. The reservoir's water level still dropping. After unpacking, Laurel walked down Main Street, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. Faces turned away as she passed. A woman hurried her children across the street. Outside the pharmacy, old Tom Baker suddenly became very interested in adjusting his truck's side mirror. The Rusted Horse Saloon had a new sign, but the building's bones were unchanged. The parking lot where the ravens had gathered that last night was empty except for a few pickup trucks. Laurel didn't go in. Not yet. She drove up to the reservoir overlook just as dusk was settling. The crime scene, sprawled below, floodlights already blazing against the growing darkness. Yellow tape fluttered in the evening breeze. Teams in white coveralls moved purposefully around equipment and tarps. Laurel parked and walked to the guardrail. The water had pulled back dramatically, revealing the reservoir's secrets like a slowly opening book. From this height, she could see the collapsed dock where they'd found the bikes, the mud still churned up from the recovery operation. The air smelled of exposed lakebed and pine trees. A familiar scent. She'd spent countless hours up here in those first months, watching the water and wondering. Now, the water had finally answered, but with more questions than closure. She pulled Eva's photo from the binder, holding it up against the darkening landscape. Her sister's frozen smile seemed to hold a different meaning now, as if she'd known something was coming. "You waited for me," Laurel whispered into the gathering night. The words fell soft as ash, mixing with the distant sounds of the recovery team and the gentle lap of water against new shores. Below, the floodlights cast long shadows across the exposed lakebed. They illuminated the present while throwing the past into deeper darkness. Laurel watched the investigators move through their careful choreography of evidence collection and documentation. She'd seen this scene in her dreams for 23 years. Some kind of discovery, some thread to pull, but now that it was real, the weight of it pressed against her chest like a physical thing. The vest with Eva's name, the chained bikes speaking of deliberate acts, the mud slowly giving up its hold on buried truth. A car door slammed somewhere behind her. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Laurel didn't turn around. "Ms. Collier?" It was Detective Reeves, her voice carrying easily in the evening air. "We should talk about what we've found." Laurel nodded, still looking out over the water. "Tell me everything." The floodlights below seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat hidden in the earth. Somewhere in that illuminated space lay answers about her sister's last ride, about the night that had swallowed 10 people whole and left nothing but ripples in a reservoir's dark waters. Tomorrow, she would begin again, asking questions, taking notes, following leads. But for now, Laurel stood at the overlook, feeling closer to Eva than she had in 23 years. The truth was rising with the mud, waiting to be read like Braille in the landscape below. The morgue's fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the examination room as Dr. Sarah Chen, the state forensic pathologist, laid out her preliminary findings. Laurel sat rigidly in a metal chair, her reporter's notebook open but untouched. "We've confirmed partial remains of 8 individuals," Dr. Chen explained, her voice steady and clinical. "All male, based on skeletal indicators. Age ranges consistent with the missing Ravens members." She gestured to a series of photographs spread across the steel table. Preservation in the reservoir was better than expected due to the mud seal. Laurel forced herself to look at the images. Fragments of bones, personal effects, items that had once belonged to living, breathing people. "And Eva?" Dr. Chen shook her head. "No female remains among those recovered. We've done preliminary DNA matching with samples from the families. Your sister isn't here." The absence should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like another door closing. Laurel pressed her fingers against her temples. "Cause of death?" "That's where it gets complicated." Dr. Chen pulled up several detailed scans on her computer. "No blunt force trauma, no obvious bullet wounds. But we're seeing some peculiar tissue degradation patterns in the preserved soft tissue samples. It could indicate poisoning or asphyxiation, but we'll need more detailed toxicology to be certain." Laurel wrote nothing down. The words wouldn't come. Outside the examination room window, autumn rain fell steadily on the parking lot, creating circles that spread and disappeared. "There's something else," Dr. Chen said, pulling out a final photograph. This was found in one of the saddlebags. Water damage made it nearly illegible, but our lab managed to enhance some of the text. The image showed a weathered piece of paper, part of what looked like an accounting ledger. 8 names were barely visible, written in faded ink. At the bottom, a single word: paid. "We'll need to retain this as evidence," Dr. Chen said. "But you should know. Your sister's name isn't on this list." Laurel left the morgue in a daze, the rain soaking through her jacket as she walked to her car. She drove automatically through Marrow Creek streets, ending up at the Rusted Horse without conscious decision. The bar was nearly empty at 3 in the afternoon. A few regulars hunched over their drinks, carefully not looking at her. Behind the counter, a new bartender, young, with sleeve tattoos, polished glasses with mechanical precision. Laurel took a seat at the far end, where the old-timers gathered. She recognized Walt Buchanan, who'd been ancient even when Eva first arrived in town. He nursed what looked like bottom-shelf whiskey, his rheumy eyes fixed on the scarred wood surface. "Buy you another, Walt?" Laurel asked quietly. He didn't look up. "Ain't got nothing to say to you." Not asking for words, just offering a drink. The silence stretched. Finally, Walt's gnarled hand pushed his empty glass forward. Laurel signaled the bartender, who brought over the bottle without comment. 3 drinks later, Walt's shoulders had loosened slightly. His fingers traced patterns in condensation rings on the bar top. "Found something today," Laurel said carefully. "Old ledger page, 8 names, word paid at the bottom." Walt's hand stilled. "Some things better stay in the water. My sister's name wasn't on it." The old man's mouth twisted. "Course it wasn't. Circle never breaks itself." He knocked back the rest of his whiskey and stood, joints creaking. "That's all you're getting." Laurel watched him shuffle toward the door, his cryptic words echoing in her mind. The circle never breaks itself. She'd heard variations of that phrase before, always from the oldest residents, always in whispers. The county archive building sat on the edge of town, a squat brick structure that smelled of dust and forgotten papers. The afternoon clerk, Mrs. Denton, brightened when Laurel walked in. Finally, someone who didn't treat her like a ghost. "I pulled those Ravens files you requested," she said, leading Laurel to a back room. "Most club records were destroyed in '99, but we did find something interesting in an old business license application." The box she brought out contained typical paperwork: incorporation documents, tax forms, insurance records. But beneath those lay a thin leather-bound book, its pages warped with age. "It was misfiled with building permits," Mrs. Denton explained. "Previous clerk must have missed it during the purge." Laurel pulled on cotton gloves and carefully opened the book. Inside, neat columns tracked membership dues, maintenance fees, and something listed simply as tribute. The entries stopped abruptly in early 1999. She photographed every page, paying special attention to the final entries. 8 names, 8 amounts, all marked paid in full. Her phone buzzed. A text from Detective Reeves. "Call immediately. New discovery at Reservoir." Laurel thanked Mrs. Denton and drove to the recovery site, where a ranger waited with Reeves near the southern end of the exposed lake bed. The area was darker, deeper than where they'd found the chained bikes. "One of our survey teams spotted it," the ranger explained, leading them down a muddy path. "Caught in the root system of an old submerged tree. At the water's edge, partially exposed by the continuing drought, a twisted piece of chrome glinted dully. The metal was scratched but intact, preserved by the same mud that had protected the other evidence." "Part of a handlebar assembly," Reeves said. "Different model than the others we recovered. Lab's running comparisons now." Laurel stared at the metal fragment, remembering Eva's bike, the one she'd learned to ride on, the one she'd been so proud of. The 9th bike, the missing piece. The water lapped quietly at the shore, still holding its secrets. But piece by piece, year by year, the truth was emerging from the depths. "The circle never breaks itself," Walt had said. But circles could be broken from the outside, by time, by drought, by sisters who refused to stop asking questions. Laurel watched as evidence technicians carefully documented and removed the chrome piece. Above them, Clouds gathered for another autumn storm, their reflection turning the reservoir's surface into a mirror of gray uncertainty. The ranger's radio crackled with static and routine communications. The techs consulted overboard, proper packaging procedures. And somewhere beneath the dark water, Laurel knew, more answers waited to be found. The message arrived at 3 a.m., jarring Laurel from fitful sleep in her rental cabin. A Reddit notification. 1999, Raven's MC disappearance. I might know something. She almost dismissed it. After the reservoir discovery hit national news, her inbox had flooded with theories and false leads. But this message was different. Check obituaries. Aug 1997. Tommy Cray Dawson. Motorcycle accident on 97. No body recovered. Because there wasn't one. He's alive. Sister's mobile home park outside Redmond. Goes by Frank Miller now. Tell him Eva's sister wants the truth. Laurel sat up, fully awake. She remembered the name from Eva's letters. Tommy had helped her learn to ride, kept her bike running. His death had devastated her. Dawn found Laurel driving east on Highway 97, coffee growing cold in the cup holder. The sisters' mobile home park appeared after 3 wrong turns, a collection of weathered trailers surrounded by juniper trees and chain-link fencing. Unit 23 sat at the back, distinguished by a rusted Harley parts sign nailed above the door. The windows were covered with aluminum foil. An ancient tabby cat watched from beneath a disabled Ford pickup. Laurel knocked. Nothing. She knocked again, harder. Frank Miller? She called. I need to talk about the Ravens. Silence stretched. Then, shuffling footsteps, the click of multiple locks. The door opened 6 inches, secured by a chain. One roomy eye peered out. You're her, a raspy voice said. The sister. Jesus, you got her eyes. Tommy Dawson? The eye flinched. Nobody's called me that in 25 years. Get in before someone sees. The interior was dim, cluttered but obsessively clean. Newspapers covered the walls. Decades of clippings about the Ravens, the disappearance, Eva. A police scanner hummed in the corner. Tommy Cray Dawson was gaunt, ravaged by time and what smelled like cheap whiskey. Tattoos crawled up his neck, faded to bluish smudges. His hands shook as he chain-smoked generic cigarettes. You shouldn't have come, he said, pacing. They watch. They always watch. Who watches? Everyone. No one. Don't matter now. Too old to run again. He collapsed into a threadbare recliner. You want to know about that night? About Eva? Yes. Gonna need something stronger than coffee. He pulled a flask from his pocket, took a long drink. Should have told someone years ago. But Jace, he had ways of finding people. Jace is dead, Laurel said. His bike's in the reservoir. Cray laughed, a horrible broken sound. Maybe, maybe not. Man came back different from Nam, said he learned things over there, about cleansing, about circles. The Midnight Circle. Wasn't always like that. Started as just rides, brotherhood. Then Jace got religion. Not any church kind, something older. Said the road was sacred ground. Said we had to prove ourselves worthy. He lit another cigarette with trembling fingers. The circle became more ritual than ride. Sometimes people didn't come back. Laurel leaned forward. What happened to Eva? Cray's face crumpled. She wasn't supposed to be there. That night was different. Jace had been acting strange for weeks, talking about pollution in the ranks, need for final cleansing. Why was Eva there? She'd found something, never told me what. But she was scared. Said she had to ride, had to see it through. He took another shaking drink. We made camp up in the high country. Jace passed around a bottle, special stuff, he said, for purification. But you didn't drink. No. Saw what happened to the others. Got sick by the fire. Strange sick, like their insides were burning. His voice dropped to a whisper. I ran, left my bike, walked out before sunrise. Last thing I saw was Iva on Jace's bike, heading deeper into the trees. She looked empty, like she already knew. Knew what? That none of them were riding home. He stood suddenly, went to a drawer, pulled out a creased map. His hands shook as he spread it across the coffee table. There's a place, up past the old fire tower. Locals called it the Devil's Throat. Logging pit from the 50s, never filled in, deep enough to swallow secrets. He circled a spot with trembling fingers. She's not in the lake. Jace wouldn't. He needed sacred ground. Needed the forest to keep watch. You're saying... I'm saying Eva knew too much. Saying Jace believed in circles. And circles don't end. They just go deeper. He folded the map, pressed it into her hands. That's all I got. Truth's been eating at me for 24 years. Maybe now it can eat at someone else. Laurel stared at the map, at the lonely X marking an unmarked grave. Why tell me now? Because I see her sometimes, in dreams. She doesn't speak, just stands there with those knowing eyes, like she's waiting. He slumped back in the chair, suddenly ancient. Tell the cops, don't tell the cops. Won't matter to me anymore. Doctor says the cancer's in my bones now. Few months, maybe less. He wouldn't meet her gaze. I ran that night. Been running ever since. But you can't outrun circles. They always come back around. Laurel left him there, in his aluminum fortress with its wall of yellowed memories. The map felt heavy in her pocket, weighted with a truth that had waited 24 years to surface. The tabby cat watched her drive away, silent guardian of a dead man's confession. Behind the foil-covered windows, Tommy Cray Dawson poured another drink and waited for the dreams to come. The morning fog clung to the pines as 3 Oregon State Police vehicles crawled up the old logging road. Laurel sat in the passenger seat of Detective Renaud's SUV, watching the odometer tick up. The coordinates from Cray's map led them 8 miles into the Cascade foothills, well beyond where tourist trails ended. You sure about this source? Renaud asked, his weather face tight with concentration as he navigated around a fallen branch. The detective had been skeptical when Laurel brought him Cray's confession, but the discovery of the 9th bike had made the department more willing to pursue leads. He's dying, Laurel said. No reason to lie now. The convoy stopped where fallen trees blocked the road. A cold wind whipped through the valley as the search team unloaded their gear. 4 officers, 2 forensics techs, and a police dog named Max formed a loose circle around Detective Renaud. Site should be northeast, about quarter-mile in, he said, checking the GPS. Watch your footing. Ground's unstable from all the rain. Laurel followed close behind the group, her boots sliding on wet pine needles. The forest felt wrong here, too quiet, with branches twisted into unnatural shapes. Years of winter storms had reshaped the landscape, but something about this place seemed deliberately hidden. Mac the police dog grew agitated as they approached a clearing. The handler held him steady while forensics documented the scene with photographs and markers. There, Renaud pointed. Depression in the ground, about 15 feet across. The pit was shallow now, partially filled with decades of erosion. Animal bones, deer mostly, littered the edges along with rusted beer cans and broken glass. But the arrangement felt purposeful, as if the garbage had been scattered to disguise something underneath. Check the perimeter first, Renaud ordered. Work our way in systematically. The team spread out, marking anything suspicious with small yellow flags. Laurel stood back, hands jammed in her coat pockets, watching them sift through layers of forest debris. Every few minutes, she glanced at her phone, expecting another message from Cray. But he'd gone silent after their meeting. Got something, called one of the forensics techs. She was kneeling by a rotting log, carefully brushing away leaves. Metal object, wrapped in plastic. Renaud pulled on latex gloves and crouched beside her. Using small tools, they extracted what appeared to be a revolver, sealed in a degraded sandwich bag. The gun was badly rusted, but the outline was unmistakable. "Bag it carefully," Renaud said. "We'll need the lab to—" "Here," another officer called from the opposite side. "There's paper. Looks like it was stuffed inside this log." Laurel's heart jumped. She knew that handwriting the moment they pulled it free. The tight, precise letters Eva used when making notes at the vet clinic. The paper was folded multiple times, protected somewhat by the hollow log, but the edges were stained dark brown. Detective Renaud held it carefully by the corners. "We need to get this to the lab before it deteriorates further. But look, it's a list of some kind." Laurel leaned in, squinting at the faded ink. Names and dates arranged chronologically. Marcus Webb, June 1975. Daniel Costa, August 1978. Keith Murphy, July 1982. The list. He continued, 8 names total. Some had additional notes, but water damage made them illegible. At the bottom, in Eva's distinctive script, "Pattern E. August rides?" "Blood," said the forensics tech, pointing to the brown stains. "We'll test it, but—" "Those names," Laurel said, her voice hollow. "They were Ravens. Early members, before Jace took over." Eva was researching something. Renaud nodded slowly. "Building a timeline. Question is, of what?" The search continued for hours. They found more beer cans, scattered motorcycle parts, even an old Ravens patch rotted almost beyond recognition. But nothing else with Eva's writing. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Renaud called it, "We'll get a full team up here tomorrow. Ground-penetrating radar. See what's underneath." The evidence was carefully cataloged and bagged. Laurel watched them work, remembering how Eva used to organize her veterinary notes. Everything dated, cross-referenced, building toward a larger picture. "What did you find, Eva? What were you piecing together?" Back at her rental cabin, Laurel's hands shook as she dialed the number for the state forensics lab. A tired voice answered on the third ring. "This is Marion Chang." "Dr. Chang, Laurel Collier. I'm working with Detective Renaud on the Ravens case. We found something today. A list, handwritten. There are bloodstains, but the paper needs stabilization before it deteriorates further. How soon can you—" "Bring it first thing tomorrow," Chang interrupted. "I'll clear my morning schedule." Laurel hung up and stared at her case wall. Photos, newspaper clippings, and now Cray's map with its haunting X. Eva had been investigating something in those final weeks. Something worth killing for. The names on that list were a beginning, but Laurel knew with cold certainty that they were only the surface of a much darker truth. Outside her window, the moon rose over Marrow Creek, almost full, like it had been that August night when 10 riders vanished into the mist. 9 bikes had been found, but Eva's remains were still out there, keeping their secrets. The fluorescent lights of the Oregon State Police evidence room cast harsh shadows across the metal table where Laurel spread out her materials. She'd been here for hours, cross-referencing the names from Eva's list against missing persons reports from the 1970s and 80s. Detective Renaud had granted her temporary access, though his skepticism showed in the tight set of his jaw. "Marcus Webb," Laurel muttered, typing the name into the database. The screen flickered, then displayed a yellowed newspaper clipping from 1975. "Local man missing after motorcycle trip." Webb's DMV photo showed a bearded man in his 30s, wearing a leather vest with a familiar patch, the Ravens' original logo, before Jace redesigned it. "Here's something," Renaud said, pushing aside a stack of folders. "Daniel Costa, reported missing August 12, 1978. His bike was found at the bottom of Miller's Ravine. Everyone assumed drunk driving." Laurel's pen moved across her notepad, connecting dates and locations. Both disappeared in summer. Both were Ravens. And look, she pulled out Cray's statement transcript. He mentioned Costa specifically, said Jace took over leadership right after Costa vanished. "Could be coincidence," Renaud said, but his voice lacked conviction. The evidence room door opened. Tommy Cray Dawson shuffled in, supported by a nurse from his hospice facility. His skin had a gray pallor that hadn't been there last week. The cancer was working fast. "Show him," Laurel said, sliding Eva's recovered list across the table. Cray's hands trembled as he studied the names. She figured it out. Smart girl, Eva. Too smart. He tapped Keith Murphy's name. "Remember him, Detective? July 82. They found his wallet in the river, nothing else." "I was just a rookie then," Renaud admitted. "But yeah, I worked that scene." "Murphy wanted out," Cray continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Said Jace was taking things too far with the ritual stuff. Next Midnight Circle, he didn't come back. Jace told us he'd moved to Alaska." Laurel leaned forward. "What rituals, Cray?" "Purification," he called it. Jace came back from Nam different. Said he'd learned secrets about cleansing the soul through sacrifice. Cray's eyes darted to the corners of the room. The circle wasn't just a ride. It was judgment. A knock interrupted them. Marion Chang from the forensics lab entered, carrying a clear evidence bag. The blood analysis came back on Eva's list. It's not hers. "Whose then?" Laurel asked. "Mixed sample. At least 3 individuals, all male. DNA's degraded, but we might get matches if we had bodies to compare it to," Renaud finished. He turned to Cray. "Where are they buried?" But Cray was staring at the wall, lost in memory. Jace kept a book. Black leather like a Bible. Names and dates. Said it was the club's testament. Eva must have found it. Laurel's phone buzzed. A text from the dive team still working at Danner Reservoir. Her hands shook as she read it aloud. "9th bike located in Southern Trench. Recovery in progress." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. Laurel stood at the reservoir's edge, watching cables slowly lift a twisted mass of metal from the murky water. The motorcycle's chrome was eaten away by decades underwater, but its frame was intact. Unlike the other 8 bikes, this one had been hidden separately, wedged under a fallen tree in the deepest part of the lake. "Look at this," one of the divers called, pointing to the underside of the gas tank. Laurel crouched down, using her phone's flashlight to illuminate crude letters scratched into the metal. "Jace." "His personal bike," Cray confirmed from his wheelchair. The nurse had brought him to the scene at his insistence. "Custom Harley. He treated it like a holy relic." "No body with it?" Laurel asked the dive team leader. "Nothing we could find. Bottom's pretty silted up, though." Back at the station, Laurel called the retired sheriff, Doug Harlan. After 3 tries, he agreed to meet her at his home, a small ranch house on the outskirts of town. The old lawman had aged badly, his face deeply lined, hands unsteady as he poured coffee. "I know why you're here," he said, before Laurel could speak. "You found Jace's bike. And Eva's list. Names of people who disappeared over 20 years. You were sheriff for most of them." Harlan stared into his coffee cup. "What do you want me to say? That I knew? That I looked the other way?" He stood suddenly, went to a cabinet, and returned with a manila envelope. "Here. Should have burned it years ago." Inside were photographs. Crime scene shots from the 70s and 80s. Each showed similar details. Abandoned motorcycles, scattered personal effects, tire tracks leading nowhere, and in several, a distinctive pattern of ash on the ground. "The circle," Harlan said quietly. "Jace's ritual. Anyone who threatened his control, questioned his leadership, they'd get invited to ride. Special honor, he called it." The old sheriff's voice cracked. "I told myself they were just leaving town. Easier than admitting that he was killing them," Laurel finished. "And you covered it up." "I was a coward," Harlan admitted. "Jace had something on everyone. But your sister, she was different. She saw through him, started asking questions, found proof." "The book Cray mentioned?" Harlan nodded. "Jace's record of his sacrifices. Eva confronted him about it at the bar that night. I was there. She said she'd expose everything." "So he added her to the circle," Laurel said, bile rising in her throat. But something went wrong. His bike ended up in the lake too, and no one ever saw Jace again. Laurel spread the old photos across Harlan's kitchen table, along with printouts of the names from Eva's list. A pattern emerged. Not just the summer disappearances, but locations, methods, cover stories. Jace had turned the Ravens from a brotherhood into a cult of personality, eliminating anyone who resisted. 8 bikes chained together, she mused, but Jace's hidden separately, and Eva's never found. 9 riders went out that night, Harlan said. Only 8 came back, after a fashion. The 9th bike might tell us why, if you can find someone to restore it. Later that evening, Laurel watched forensics techs carefully clean decades of corrosion from Jace's recovered motorcycle. Under the grime, more crude scratches emerged. Tally marks, dates, initials. And near the engine block, partially hidden, a crude etching of a raven impaled on a dagger. Some kind of signature? Renaud wondered. No, Laurel said, remembering Eva's veterinary textbooks, her precise notes. It's evidence. She left us a message, if we can decode it. The lab lights hummed overhead as they photographed every mark, every scratch. Somewhere in this wreck was the truth about that final ride, about what Eva discovered, and why 9 people vanished into the August night. Cray watched from his wheelchair, eyes fixed on the rusted machine. The circle's broken now, he whispered. Can't hide the truth anymore. Laurel touched the rough-etched letters of Jace's name. After 23 years, the lake had given up its secrets. But the biggest mystery remained. What happened after the others fell? What final confrontation played out between Eva and Jace on that moonlit night? The answers were there, written in rust and steel, waiting to be found. The forensics lab smelled of rust and lake water. Under harsh fluorescent lights, technicians carefully dismantled Jace's recovered motorcycle piece by piece. Each component was photographed, catalogued, and laid out on white sheets like artifacts from an archaeological dig. Laurel watched through the observation window, her reflection ghostly against the glass. 23 years of questions, and now answers were emerging from the mud and corrosion. But not the ones she'd hoped for. Detective Renaud appeared beside her, holding a steel evidence tray. Found something in one of the saddlebags. You should see this. Inside the tray lay a plastic evidence bag containing what looked like burned paper. As Laurel leaned closer, she could make out the edges of a photograph, its surface warped and water damaged, but still partially visible. Can we? She gestured at the lab door. Renaud nodded and led her inside. The photo was carefully transferred to a light table where a technician began the delicate process of separating the layers with a fine probe. Careful, Renaud warned. It's fragile as tissue paper. Under the magnification lamp, details emerged from the damaged surface. A campfire. 2 figures. The timestamp in the corner read 11:47 p.m., August 14th, 1999. Laurel's breath caught. That's the night. The larger figure was unmistakably Jace, his weathered face lit harsh by firelight. He was standing, gesturing with one hand. Across from him stood Eva, her auburn hair catching the flame's glow. Her posture was defensive, arms crossed. They were clearly arguing. Last known image of either of them, Renaud said quietly. Laurel studied her sister's face in the photo. Even through the damage and discoloration, she could read the determination in Eva's stance. Not fear. Resolve. Look at the background, the technician pointed. Behind the fire. Something's on the ground. Laurel squinted at the dark shapes. Books? Papers, maybe. Could be Jace's ledger, Renaud suggested. The one Cray mentioned. The lab door opened and Marion Chang entered, carrying a preliminary report. DNA results from the bone fragment found with the bike. Not human, deer or elk, most likely. But there's something else. She laid out several photos showing close-ups of scratches on the motorcycle's frame. These marks? They're not random damage. They're deliberate. Laurel leaned in. The crude lines formed a pattern, a bird, a raven, pierced by what looked like a blade. Eva's work, she said with certainty. She was sending a message. About Jace, Renaud asked. About what he really was. What the ravens had become under him. Laurel touched the photo gently. She confronted him that night. Not just about the ledger, about everything. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Laurel stood at the reservoir overlook, watching sunrise paint the drained lakebed in shades of rust and gold. The recovery crews had finished their work. 8 motorcycles lay under tarps in the evidence yard. The 9th, Jace's, was still being processed in the lab. But Eva's bike was never found. Workers were dismantling the crime scene tape when Cray's nurse wheeled him up beside Laurel. His breathing was labored now, skin waxy under the morning light. "I brought something," he said, pulling a creased envelope from his jacket. Inside was a faded Polaroid showing the ravens gathered outside the rusted horse. Eva stood at the edge of the group, half smiling. "Took this her first week with us, before she learned the truth," Laurel finished. Cray nodded weakly. "Jace kept saying we needed purification, said some of us were tainted. But Eva, she saw through it, found his book. All those names, all those years. The ones who disappeared. Jace called them offerings to the road, said their deaths cleared the way for something greater." Cray's voice cracked. "I was too scared to stop him." But Ava wasn't. Laurel thought of the burned photo, that final confrontation by firelight. "What happened after you ran? I heard bikes starting up, voices. Then nothing." Cray's eyes went distant. "Next morning, checking the news, waiting to see. But there was nothing. Like they'd all just vanished into the dark. By afternoon, dark clouds were gathering over the mountains. Laurel made one final visit to the evidence lab, where technicians were finishing their analysis of Jace's motorcycle. "No blood traces," Marion reported, "but we found this." She held up a small evidence bag containing fragments of white cloth. "Caught in the chain guard. Matches the material of Eva's vest." Laurel stared at the scraps. Had there been a struggle? A chase? Or something else entirely? "There's one more thing," Marion said. "We tested the residue inside the gas tank. Found traces of an organic compound, probably toxic if ingested. Still running screens to identify it." "Poison," Laurel whispered. "That's how he did it. All those years." But if Jace had planned to eliminate the whole club that night, something had gone wrong. His own bike ended up in the lake. And Eva... Thunder rolled across the valley as Laurel drove to the overlook one last time. In her trunk were 8 motorcycle helmets, donated by local riders after she'd posted the story online. Each one represented a life ended too soon, a truth buried too long. The rain held off as she arranged them on wooden stakes, driven into the ground. 8 empty shells facing the water where their owners had rested for 23 years. She left one space empty in the circle. For Eva, lightning flickered in the clouds as Laurel placed a bouquet of white irises, Eva's favorites, in that empty space. The flowers glowed against the darkening sky like pale flames. "I found what you discovered," she said softly, "about Jace, about all of it. Whatever truth you carried that night, it didn't drown. You made sure of that." Wind stirred the irises, scattering petals across the ground. Below, the reservoir's waters were slowly rising again, reclaiming their secrets. But not all of them. Not anymore. Laurel touched the stake where Eva's helmet should have been. "You chose to ride that night, knowing what might happen, knowing someone had to stop him." Thunder answered, closer now. The first drops of rain began to fall. 8 helmets, 8 bikes, 8 lost souls finally found. But the 9th rider, and whatever resolution played out between teacher and student, between corruption and truth, remained known only to the darkness that had swallowed them that moonlit night. Laurel left the memorial as the storm broke over Marrow Creek. The irises bent in the wind, white petals scattering like stars across the empty ground where Eva's helmet would never rest. Some truths, Laurel had learned, refuse to stay buried. They rise like bones from troubled waters, demanding to be seen, even if their full story remains forever untold. The mystery of Eva's final ride would keep its deepest secrets. But she had ensured the most important truth survived. Evil can hide behind brotherhood, behind loyalty, behind ritual and tradition. But it cannot hide forever. Not when someone is brave enough to face it, to name it, to carry its evidence into the dark, even at the cost of never returning to the light. Behind Laurel, 8 empty helmets stood witness in the rain, and in the space where the 9th should be, white irises glowed like pale flames against the gathering storm.